In response to industrialization, socialists and transcendentalists developed utopian enclaves throughout the United States dedicated to forming ideal humans through education and eugenics, as well as preserving the putting out system. These societies held varying views of religion, although all incorporated or excluded religion in order to perfect the societies as the Creator saw fit. Three moderately successful and largely impactful utopias were constructed as part of the reform movement of the 19th century: Brook Farm, the Oneida Community, and New Harmony. George Ripley, born October 3, 1802, was an American social reformer, Unitarian minister, and journalist associated with Transcendentalism. Born in Greenfield, Massachusetts, George Ripley attained a degree from Harvard University before becoming ordained the minister of the Purchase Street Church in Boston. Shortly after, he resigned from the church to put transcendental beliefs in practice by founding an experimental commune called Brook Farm. Charles Fourier, who Ripley cites as his inspiration, was a French philosopher of this time period.
In October of 1840, Ripley announced his plan to form a utopian community based on Fourier's ideas. He described it as a light over this country and this entire age, because he knew that, if successful, this would be a monumental undertaking, so he decided to market it accordingly. Ripley and his wife formed a joint stock company in 1841, along with 10 other initial investors, in which shares of the company were sold for a promise of a percentage of the profits of the farm. They chose the Ellis Farm in West Roxbury, Massachusetts, as the site of their experiment, which they named Brook Farm. It's almost 170 acres, were about 8 miles from Boston, and they were marketed as a place of great natural beauty, combining a convenient nearness to the city with a degree of retirement and freedom from unfavorable influences, unusual even in the country. The land, however, turned out to be difficult to farm, and the community struggled with financial difficulties. So they decided instead to focus on the more profitable greenhouses and craft shops, and ignoring the land for which the farm was founded.
Brook Farm was initially based mostly on the ideas of transcendentalism. One participant, a man named John Codman, who joined the community in 1843, wrote,
"It was for the meanest a life above humdrum, and for the greatest something far, infinitely far beyond."
In 1844, the community, perpetually struggling financially, drafted an entirely new constitution and committed to following more closely the Fourierist model. By May 1846, troubled by the financial difficulties at Brook Farm, Ripley had made an informal split from the community. By its closure a year later, Brook Farm had amassed a total debt of nearly $18,000 and was deemed a complete failure by Ripley himself. After its dissolution in 1846, Brook Farm was sold off into separate pieces, both for private use and by the state of Massachusetts itself. Charles Fourier's ideas were still in use during the Second Great Awakening and onward. These included, but were not limited to, feminism, support of homosexuality as a personal orientation, equal educational opportunities, and the idea that Jews were the source of all evil and should be forced to perform farm work. John Humphrey Noyes was a utopian socialist who coined the term
Free love.
Noyes believed that Christ's second coming was in 70 AD, and that the world was, during his lifetime, in a new age. Convinced in that fully, he experienced a conversion to perfectionism, and came to think that whatever he did was preordained by God, and, therefore, without sin. His radical views estranged him from the church and his professors at Yale.
When Noyes was accused of adultery, he and several of his followers fled to Oneida, New York, where they and local perfectionists founded a commune.
The Oneida community had several principles that differentiated it from other settlements in the area. The community's individual members were subject to the criticism of their neighbors. Noyes was not exempt. He was often critiqued for his sexual promiscuity and other bad habits. Additionally, the younger members of the settlement, upon coming of age, were introduced to sexual intercourse by the older and not quite so fertile population. Some of the younger members, once educated, were recruited for an experiment in eugenics. Oneida community was trying to breed a more perfect race of humans. In all, 58 children were produced. They were raised with plenty of exercise and education, and a strong emphasis on non-attachment with the parents.
Eventually, Oneida's founder and leader would become the downfall of the community.
Oneida's decline came about due to several factors. Noyes' attempt to pass on the leadership of the community to his agnostic son, Noyes' charges for rape, which he fled, and the people's desire for more traditional relationships with their spouses. Complex marriage was abandoned in 1879, followed by the dissolution of Oneida Community in 1881. A joint stock company formed by the members in Oneida's declining years still exists today, its most well-known product being silverware. The mansion house, the old home of Noyes and his family, still stands in present-day Oneida.
A third significant utopian society was built in 1825 by British socialist Robert Owen. Robert Owen had already successfully converted his mill town of New Lanark into a utopia with the help of Jeremy Bentham and William Allen.
Robert Owen was a strong believer in determinism, the belief that the personality and behavior of man is determined by his environment and his education.
Because of this, he strongly emphasized education in New Lanark, and later, New Harmony.
He opposed the concept of religion, claiming it made man weak, and was a strong supporter of the putting out system over the factory system.
His experiments were therefore entirely secular and devoid of factories. After the success of New Lanark, Robert Owen attempted to build a utopia. He acquired Harmony from the Harmonists in 1825.
Robert Owen had anticipated people of similar ideology for New Harmony's colonization, but not enough of the settlers were willing to put faith in the greater good of the society.
However, within 2 years, New Harmony, as the utopia was called, had declined due to economic hardship. Josiah Warren, an original participant in New Harmony, helped to develop individualist anarchy as a result of his witnessing the failure of socialism in Owen's experiment.
Warren viewed the differences of opinions, tastes, and goals as the central reason for New Harmony's downfall, and described its failure as a bloodless miniature reenactment of the French Revolution.
Despite these attempts to protect the putting out system, industrialization prevailed, permanently preventing the vision of the idealists at the heart of the antebellum period utopias. The eugenics program of Oneida was influential during the eugenics movement of the early 1920s, in which scientists dabbled in selective breeding of humanity in order to perfect the human races. American individualist anarchy, formed from the failure of New Harmony, led to the establishment of 2 successful utopias, Utopia and Modern Times, both run on the theory of mutualism, in which money represents units of labor. Although utopian experiments became much less common after the 1840s, similar communities such as Arden, Delaware, and Freeland, Washington, communes founded on the principles of socialism and egalitarianism, which are still viable societies, continue to be attempted.